but rather, how long had he been planning this? How long had he been in control from the shadows? Hours passed, and every corner of Pelican Bay was swept for Kincaid. Guards and officers tore through the SU, every locked cell, every hallway. They searched the laundry room, the exercise yard, even the staff quarters, but nothing. He was nowhere to be found. It wasn't until later that night, when the guards opened the storage room door, an area often forgotten, a place where the most confidential materials were kept, that the horror truly began to unfold. There, on the cold concrete floor, lay a body. But it wasn't just any body. It was a guard. One of the men who'd been part of the team that had been patrolling during the lockdown. The man had been brutally tortured, his body left as a gruesome message. But this wasn't just about the murder. What made it even more chilling was the symbol that had been carved into the dead man's chest. A simple yet unmistakable mark, the symbol of Kincaid's gang, the pit. As the shock of the discovery set in, the prison's highest authorities scrambled to cover up what was now clearly a brutal message from one of their most dangerous inmates. A message that echoed far beyond the walls of Pelican Bay. But just as investigators began to piece together the horror, something else happened, something that sent chills down the spine of even the most hardened officers. The prison's security cameras, which had been capturing every moment of the chaos, went completely black. Every feed, every live shot gone. For a brief moment, the entire prison was plunged into darkness. Then, one by one, the security systems came back online, but only with more disturbing news. The footage from the SU was erased, not just deleted, but wiped clean, as if it had never existed. It was as if Kincaid had never been there. The truth was being buried before. You're about to hear the truth behind one of the most dangerous places on Earth. Trust me, you're not ready for what happened behind the walls of Pelican Bay. So, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Because the story I'm about to tell isn't just history. It's the truth no one wanted you to know. Don't click away. The final truth was never meant to be public. The air in Pelican Bay State Prison was heavy, thick with the metallic scent of sweat and blood. It was a place built for the worst of the worst. A place where the prison system sent its most violent offenders, people too dangerous to even be housed with others. But today, something far worse than usual was unfolding in its darkest corners. Inmates had always feared the security housing unit, the SEU. It was where the lights never went out, where isolation and mental games were weapons far deadlier than any blade or shank. It was a place where silence screamed, and even the toughest criminals had been known to break. But what happened today was different. It started with a low rumble, a quick shuffle of boots on concrete, the barely audible sound of a riot bubbling underneath the surface. The guards were tense, whispers shot through the halls, but none of them had expected what came next. It wasn't a fight between inmates. It wasn't even an escape attempt. It was worse. As the guards made their rounds down the long, dimly lit hallways of Pelican Bay, the silence was shattered by an alarm blaring over the speakers. A single voice crackled from the overhead speakers, too calm, too steady for what was about to happen. "We've got a situation in the SU. Lock it down." Seconds later, the steel doors to the SU slammed shut. Those unlucky enough to be caught in the wrong place at the wrong time were left locked inside. And it wasn't just any inmate who triggered the lockdown. No, this was on. Don't think you've seen everything. If you thought Pelican Bay's story was over, think again. This is where the real danger begins. Make sure you're subscribed because trust me, what happens next will make you rethink everything you thought you knew about this place. The prison's lockdown remained in effect, but inside, chaos had only just begun. The death of one of their own had sent shockwaves through Pelican Bay, and the truth was far from being uncovered. No one had a clear answer to what was happening behind the walls of this fortress. But one thing was certain. The man who had been controlling everything from the shadows was now somewhere out there alive, and perhaps even more dangerous than ever. It was a race against time. While the outside world only knew fragments of the story, Pelican Bay was descending into an inferno of suspicion, fear, and paranoia. Guards and prisoners alike were left to question who could be trusted, as Kincaid's influence loomed like a dark cloud over the entire facility. The warden was getting calls from every corner: politicians, law enforcement, even the media, who had been tipped off about the murder and escape. He had no answers for them, no clear explanation for how the most dangerous inmate in the prison had vanished without a trace. Inside the walls of the SHU, where the most notorious criminals were kept, the investigation began to unfold in unexpected ways. Detective Marie Hayes, a seasoned investigator who had been called in to help piece together the horrific events, stood in the SHU, her eyes scanning the cold metallic cells that lined the hall. The emptiness of it was eerie, like something was lurking just out of sight. She was no stranger to danger. She had worked on cases of gang violence and serial killers. But something about this case felt different. It felt personal, as if the criminals here had their own set of rules, ones that weren't just about surviving, they were about controlling the very air they breathed. She took a step toward the empty cell that had once been Kincaid's. Everything was eerily pristine, as if no one had ever lived there. No shanks, no crude drawings on the walls, no bloodstains. But Marie knew that Kincaid hadn't left it this way. Someone had cleaned it. Someone had made sure it looked untouched, as if they wanted to cover up the fact that the most violent man in the prison had walked out, free. But where was he? Marie wasn't sure if she was looking for answers or if she was just grasping at straws, trying to piece together the horror in front of her. Her fingers brushed along the cold steel bars of the neighboring cells. Her mind raced. How could an inmate this powerful disappear without leaving a trace? As she moved further into the unit, she noticed something odd. The guards who had been working the night of Kincaid's escape were acting strangely. Some avoided her gaze. Others spoke in whispers, careful with every word. It was clear they were afraid. "Detective, you might want to see this," one of the senior officers said, his voice low, as he gestured toward a hidden hallway. It wasn't part of the usual tour. It was a section of the prison that was rarely accessed. The officer led her through a narrow, darkened corridor where the air smelled stale and damp. They stopped in front of a small, unmarked door. "This is where we found it," the officer muttered. He opened the door. The room was small, empty except for a few stacked boxes and the faint scent of bleach. But on the far wall, a strange mark had been scratched into the concrete. It looked like a map. No, not a map. A diagram. It was an intricate drawing, with arrows and symbols that Marie couldn't immediately make sense of. But what caught her attention was the name at the center of Diana's diagram, the pit. She felt a chill run down her spine. The pit. The name of Kincaid's gang. But why was it here? Was Kincaid still pulling the strings from the inside? As she examined the drawing, the officer spoke again, his voice shaky. "We found it after the lockdown, after the body was discovered. We didn't think much of it at first. But now..." His words trailed off, as if he didn't want to believe what he was about to say. "Now, we think Kincaid was planning something bigger. This isn't just about an escape. This is about taking control of everything inside the prison and out." The officer's words rang in her ears. This wasn't just a manhunt anymore. This was a conspiracy. Meanwhile, on the outside, the story was beginning to unravel in ways that no one expected. News outlets were reporting on the escape, but details were scarce. No one had any concrete evidence of what had really happened. Some speculated Kincaid had escaped with help from the inside. Others said he had a network of supporters outside the prison who had planned his escape. But there was one thing that everyone agreed on. Pelican Bay was no longer a secure facility. Inmates were starting to act differently. Some who had been quiet were now speaking in hushed tones, exchanging glances like they knew something that the guards didn't. The tension in the air was thick. Something was coming. As Marie pieced together what little information she had, she couldn't shake the feeling that the worst was yet to come. Kincaid had vanished, but his legacy remained. His power still thrived in the shadows, and it was only a matter of time before his true plan was revealed. And as the days passed, something even more unsettling began to happen. The guards started to report strange occurrences. Cell doors that should have been locked suddenly found open. Inmates who were supposed to be on lockdown found themselves mysteriously released from their cells. Small, seemingly insignificant events until they started adding up. Marie knew that Kincaid was still out there, pulling the strings, leaving his mark in ways that no one could understand. In the distance, the sound of footsteps echoed down the empty hallways of Pelican Bay. And as Marie turned, she caught a glimpse of something that sent a chill down her spine. An inmate she didn't recognize, walking toward her with purpose. But when he looked up, she saw it in his eyes. The same coldness, the same power that Kincaid had once held. The truth was darker than she could have ever imagined. "We're not looking for just one man," Marie whispered to herself, her voice barely audible. "We're looking for an entire network." But how far did it go? And who was truly in control of Pelican Bay? "You thought the worst was behind us? You're wrong. The truth is about to hit harder than anything you've seen before. This is where it all comes crashing down. Stay with me, because when the truth comes out, you'll never look at Pelican Bay the same way again." The days inside Pelican Bay had turned into a tense game of cat and mouse. Everyone knew Kincaid was out there, but no one could say where. The investigation had stalled. The clues were scarce, the leads even more so. Detective Marie Hayes had followed every trail, every whisper, but still, no answers. The power Kincaid held over Pelican Bay wasn't just physical, it was psychological. It was a network, a silent system of manipulation and control that had gone unnoticed for years. Marie had seen something in the eyes of that mysterious inmate, the one who had passed her in the hallway. A glint of fear, yes, but also something else. Recognition, as though he knew exactly what was happening and knew that Marie was dangerously close to uncovering something that could change everything. Her instincts told her to follow him. She moved quickly, making her way down the long, dark corridors of Pelican Bay. Her heart pounded, the sound of her footsteps echoing in the silent hall. But she wasn't alone. The shadows seemed to follow her, each flicker of the overhead light feeling like an omen, as if the prison itself was alive, watching, waiting. As she turned the corner, she saw him again. The inmate. He was standing near a door she hadn't noticed before, hidden away in the far corner of the SHU. Her pulse quickened. There was something wrong about this whole place, about the way it had been constructed, about the secrets it held. "Why are you here?" Marie demanded, her voice low but firm. The inmate didn't respond immediately. He just stared at her, a mixture of fear and something else in his eyes. Something darker. "I know what you're looking for," he finally muttered, his voice raspy. "But you won't find it here." Marie's breath caught in her throat. "What are you talking about?" The inmate took a step closer, his voice lowering even more. "You're not looking for Kincaid. You're looking for something worse." His eyes flicked nervously around. "You're looking for the pit." Marie froze. The pit. The name had haunted her thoughts ever since she'd first seen the symbol carved into the dead guard's chest. But this was something different. It wasn't just a gang. It wasn't just a name. It was a power. A system. "What is the pit?" Marie asked, barely able to get the words out. The inmate looked at her, then lowered his voice. "It's not just Kincaid. It's a network. A group of men who control everything in here. They don't just survive, they make the rules. And they don't just control the person, they control the world outside. Everything you're looking for. It's bigger than you think." Marie took a step back. Her mind raced, trying to process what she was hearing. This wasn't just about Kincaid. It was about an entire network, a silent empire operating right under the noses of the authorities. The pit wasn't just a gang. It was an organization that had infiltrated Pelican Bay's very foundations. Before she could respond, the inmate stepped back, his face going pale. "You need to leave," he whispered urgently. "If you don't, they'll come for you too. You're too close." Marie's heart raced, but she refused to back down. "Tell me what you know," she demanded. "I need to know who's behind this." The inmate shook his head, his voice trembling. "I can't. I'm not the one to tell you, but you need to understand. They know everything. They see everything. And if you keep digging, you'll be swallowed up just like the rest." Just then, a loud clang echoed down the hallway. The inmate's eyes widened in panic and he bolted for the shadows, disappearing before Marie could even react. She stood there, her mind spinning. What had she just heard? And who was he really? The sound of approaching guards snapped her out of her thoughts. She needed to act fast. Marie turned and walked briskly toward the exit. But as she neared the door, she saw something that stopped her in her tracks. A guard, standing just beyond the doorway, was talking to someone in the shadows. At first, it was hard to make out who it was, but as the figure stepped forward into the dim light, Marie's breath caught in her chest. It was the warden. He was standing in the doorway, his eyes locked onto hers, a cold, unreadable expression on his face. "I've been expecting you," he said calmly. "You've been digging around, haven't you?" Marie's instincts flared. She had been right all along. The warden knew more than he was letting on. "You think you're the only one who can control this place?" The warden's voice was low, almost amused. "You think you can just come in here and start asking questions? Pelican Bay doesn't work like that. People like Kincaid, they don't just vanish. They're allowed to disappear." Her mind raced as she realized what he was implying. The warden wasn't just a bystander. He was part of it. He was in on it. "And now," he continued, taking a step closer, "you've seen too much, and you're about to learn exactly how deep this goes." Marie's heart pounded in her chest. The truth was out there, but now the warden was standing between her and it. There was no turning back now. As the warden moved toward her, his eyes narrowed with a deadly calm. "I'm afraid it's too late for you." Suddenly, the lights flickered, and the air grew thick with tension. A cold, familiar feeling washed over her. The walls seemed to close in, and then it hit her. Pelican Bay was never meant to be a prison. It was a place to bury secrets, and now, she had become part of those secrets. With nowhere to turn, Marie realized the horrifying truth. She wasn't just a detective anymore. She was a pawn in a much larger game. And the rules had just changed. The worst part? The game was far from over. It was just beginning. Stay tuned. The story isn't finished yet. Kindly like, comment, subscribe for more.